Hello, boys and girls. Are you excited to receive your First Holy Communion soon? The Eucharist truly is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus, of God. It's the same God who was born at Christmas, the same God who worked miracles and healed people, the same God who died on the cross on Good Friday and rose again on Easter Sunday morning. He wants to be close to you, and you get to receive him on your First Communion. That is amazing. Now I'm going to read to you a story from the Bible. It comes from the Old Testament. That means that it happened many, many years before Jesus was born. It's a story about Moses. The chosen people of God moved to Egypt. There they prospered and started growing into the great nation that God promised. At first, the kings of Egypt were called pharaohs. They were kind to the Hebrew guests and let them live in a place called Goshen. But after several centuries, the mood changed. A new dynasty of Egyptian pharaohs feared the growing number of Hebrews. What if they should join Egypt's enemies and try to take over the country? The Pharaoh came up with a very brutal solution. He threw the Hebrews into slavery and ordered that every baby boy of theirs should be killed. That would cut down on the race and end the danger, so he thought. But the Lord had other plans and would now save his chosen people. A very special baby boy was born to one of the Hebrew families in Egypt. So he wouldn't be killed, his mother took something like a big picnic basket, waterproofed its bottom and sides, and turned it into a tiny model of Noah's Ark. Commending her baby to God, she put him inside this mini boat and floated it into some reeds along the banks of the Nile. A daughter of the Pharaoh and her attendants, who were bathing at the shore downstream, noticed the little craft stuck in the reeds and retrieved it. They were shocked to find a crying baby inside. Not only did the princess save it, she adopted the infant and called him Moses, which means drawn from the water in the Hebrew language and son in Egyptian. Wait, the story gets better. The daughter of the Pharaoh needed someone to nurse little Moses. Moses' older sister Miriam came on the scene and suggested that one of the Hebrew women might do this. And so it happened that baby Moses came back to his own mother. Chance? Coincidence? Or was God involved here? Moses was raised as a member of the royal family of Egypt, but princes get into trouble, and Moses was no exception. One day he saw an Egyptian beating up a Hebrew worker. Moses was furious. He lost control of himself and he killed the Egyptian. To avoid arrest, he fled eastward into the Sinai desert, where he lived as a shepherd, tending the flocks of a man named Jethro. In fact, Jethro soon became his father-in-law, since Moses married his daughter Zipporah. Meanwhile, God had not forgotten the slavery of his people. One day, Moses saw something on the side of Mount Sinai that made no sense. A bush was on fire, yet it never burned up. Flames just kept shooting out of it. Suddenly, the voice of God announced from the flames how the Hebrews would be rescued from Egypt. "You, Moses, will go to Pharaoh and tell him, 'Let my people go.'" Me, Lord?" stammered Moses. I'm supposed to do this?" God easily took care of Moses' objection that he had no speaking talent, and he simply told him to take along his older brother Aaron as a spokesman. Aaron had a way with words. What a dramatic scene! The Pharaoh of the sprawling Egyptian empire sat on his throne, glaring at two Hebrew visitors from the desert. What could they possibly want from the master of the world? God has instructed us to tell you, Pharaoh, said Moses, let my people go, so they may serve me in the wilderness. I'm supposed to believe that? The Pharaoh laughed. Now Moses provided the miraculous sign that the Lord had given him back at the burning bush. By this you shall know that we were sent by God, said Moses. Aaron threw down his shepherd's rod and turned it into a slithering snake. Gasps of surprise erupted from the king's court. But the Pharaoh clapped his hands and brought in some court magicians, who tried to imitate what Aaron had done. They also seemed to have rods and snakes, and the king smiled as if to say, we can do that trick too. When Aaron's rod attacked and ate up the other rods, however, the Pharaoh quit smiling. Again, and in the name of God, Moses demanded that the Hebrews be set free from their slavery. And again, the Pharaoh refused. God would find other ways. A series of horrible plagues now swept across Egypt. Nature became unbalanced, and its creatures grew in monstrous numbers to attack both man and beast. Aaron waved his rod over the Nile River, and the water turned to blood, fouling the waters and killing the fish. People madly dug wells for drinking water to quench their thirst. But Pharaoh ignored God's his sign. A week later, vast swarms of frogs crawled out of the Nile and its canals, jumping into the homes and beds of Egypt, and even into the palace itself. This rattled the Pharaoh, and he promised Moses he would let the people leave if the frogs did. The frogs then all died, and never was there such a smell of decay in Egypt. Yuck. But then Pharaoh went back on his word, and he kept the people in slavery. So now more plagues were necessary. Next, the very dust of Egypt turned into gnats that crawled over everyone. And after that, swarms of flies darkened all the land of Egypt, except in Goshen, where the Hebrews lived. The fifth plague killed all of the Egyptians' livestock. That means their cows and sheep. And the sixth afflicted humans as well, whose skin now broke out in painful sores. Hail and furious thunderstorms were the seventh plague. Clouds of locusts, the eighth. And a dreadful darkness, the ninth. The Pharaoh observed that none of these affected Goshen, where the Hebrews lived, but after each plague, he still stubbornly refused to release the Hebrews. Finally, God had enough of these broken promises. Moses warned the Pharaoh that the worst plague of all was coming. In every household across the land of Egypt, their firstborn son would die. The Pharaoh refused to believe it until it happened. Now Moses assembled all the Israelites, which is another name for the Hebrew people at the time. He announced that the day of liberation had come at last, and that they would escape from Egypt with God's help. They were to pack all their belongings and eat a special dinner that night that included roast lamb, unleavened bread, and bitter herbs. The blood of the lamb was to be painted over the doorposts and lintels of their homes, so that when the angel of death took the firstborns, it would pass over all the doorways painted in this way. This is why that special supper was called the Passover, and it is still celebrated to this very day. So began the most terrible night in history. Ghastly moaning arose in all homes across the land, except those of the Hebrews. Crying was loudest at the royal palace, since the eldest son of the Pharaoh himself was stricken and died. In desperation, the king summoned Moses and told him to take his people and leave Egypt immediately. This time, the Pharaoh did not change his mind. An immense crowd of Israelites, singing praises of thanksgiving to God, now started on their great exodus, the journey from Egypt to the Promised Land. And that ends this part of the story. So the Israelites in this story are also known as the Jewish people. The Jewish people celebrate the Passover, when God passed over their homes to save them from the plagues, even now. Who else do we know is Jewish? If you're thinking of Jesus, you're right. One time, when Jesus was celebrating this very Passover meal, he took bread, he blessed it, gave it to his apostles, his friends, and said, "Take this, all of you, and eat it. This is my body." Then he took the cup of wine. He blessed it, broke it, gave it to them, and said, "Take this, all of you, and drink it. This is my blood." Where else do we hear those same words? If you're thinking at Mass, you're correct. At the Last Supper, Jesus gave us the Eucharist, his very self. He wants to be close to us, and that is a great gift, and we should try our best to receive him as often as we can. God bless you all as you continue to prepare for your First Holy Communion.